Hello, this is Curtis.
And Ruth Hanks Crenshaw.
We really wish we could be there with you all tonight, but I have to be in Knoxville to marry my second cousin and her fiance.
And we really do wish we could be there and wish we could see some old friends. We have fond memories of Mid-South and fond memories of many of you. And we just wish we could be there, but we can't.
Okay. That'll do it. Ruth is not one to speak on the camera, especially when there's nobody present. She does real well when she has a Bible conference for women that she teaches, which she does around our diocese and other areas. But she's just not one to speak in front of a camera. Now let me just mention some really good highlights that I had at Mid-South Bible College. In 1966, I had finished my third year at Christian Brothers College there, or here in Memphis. It was my third year of electrical engineering. And my mother said, why don't you transfer to Mid-South Bible College and get 1 year grounding in the Scriptures, which will give you a foundation for life, and then go back and finish up your final year at CBC. Well, that sounded like a plan, so I did that. Well, it wasn't long in that first semester at Mid-South Bible College, the fall of 1966, that I got the greeting letter from the Army saying that I was to be inducted. And I still have that letter. It was quite a shock. I just couldn't believe that it came. Why were they drafting me when I had a 4S student deferment? Well, I found out that they didn't consider the 4S student deferment valid anymore since I had changed majors. They thought I was trying to be a draft dodger and just get an extra year out of my exemption. Well, the thought never entered my mind, but nevertheless, it looked like I was going to have to be drafted out the fall of '66. But Mr. Dennison, God rest his soul, went down to the draft board and interceded, and they allowed me to stay that one semester at Mid-South Bible College. Well, I thought that it was going to be a picnic. How hard can the classes be after I had taken 3 semesters of calculus and differential equations and statics and dynamics and things of that sort? I thought it would be something like a glorified Sunday school class. Wrong. I found out that they were serious about academics. I made 3 Fs. I couldn't believe it. But then again, I wasn't really that interested in studying. I wanted to play. And the thing I wanted to play at was bowling. 10 pins. I had aspirations of possibly being a professional bowler, which I probably would never have made it. But such are the dreams sometimes of youth. And so the draft board delayed my drafting until I finished that one semester. And on one occasion I came into class and I was unprepared, and it was Paul Davidson's class. And after the class was over, he took me out of the hall and he reamed me out. He said, "You're out all night bowling, weren't you, brother?" "Yes, sir." "You're just not serious about life, are you?" "Well, I don't know. I thought I was." And that told me, excuse me, that my mother had called and talked to him and told him I'd been out late bowling. Which on the one hand made me disgusted with my mother, but I didn't say anything to her because I knew they were right. Anyway, I got drafted into the Army, and it's about the second week of February 1967. Before I was drafted into the Army, somebody at Mid-South Bible College, and I don't know if I ever figured out who it was, planned a going away party for me. I don't know when I've ever been so completely surprised in my entire life. Like, my good friend David Merriman and I were going bowling one night, and he said he needed to stop by Mid-South Bible College and see his girlfriend and talk to her for a minute. So I thought, okay, well, that's no big deal. So I waited outside in the car, and then I went into the hallway of Mid-South Bible College and know David. And then I thought I heard a voice downstairs, but all the lights were out. And I thought, what is David doing down there with his girlfriend? So David came up and invited me down. He said, we're having trouble with this Coke machine down here. Come down here and see if you can help us get it fixed. So I said, I don't know much about Coke machines, but I went, and as I hit that bottom step, the lights came on, and all kinds of students were there, and they gave me the biggest surprise I've ever had to this day in my life. And it was very encouraging. Well, anyway, make a short story longer, I ended up in the military. I ended up in Vietnam. I went through the Tet Offensive. One of the worst battles in Tet Offensive was Cam Duck, Khamduc. Put that in Google and you'll find more material to read than you can ever fathom. And it was at that particular 3 days, May the 10th through 12th, 1968, that I lost everybody in my squad, none to death but all to injury, some more serious than others, and I was the last one left. And as I was contemplating what to do, the first sergeant came around, Sergeant Johnson. He said, Crenshaw, forget about your 81 millimeter mortar. We're leaving them. Go out to the airstrip. You're to get on the 3rd Chinook. Out. I said, yes, sir. I was glad of that. So I went and lay down in a little small trench next to the airstrip. The 1st Chinook came in. You know, they have the blades on both ends of the helicopter and looked like a big boxcar. It loaded up with men and took off and was shot down. The second one came in, hit the pavement pretty hard, bounced around. Men got on it, loaded it up, took off, it was shot down. Well, that's not a very good precedent. 2 out of 2. I was to be on the 3rd one. And I was lying in the small trench next to the airstrip. I was wondering what to do. A mortar round came in and landed just outside the trench. It gave me a piece of shrapnel in my right forearm. I am right-handed. Guess what that did to my bowling career? That was the end of that. So we got out of there. I went back to Mid-South Bible College in August of 1969, and this time I really wanted to study. God had completely changed me around. 1 year in Vietnam, God kicking me lovingly in the butt in order to get my attention. Now I was ready to study. And the best thing I've probably done in my entire life, besides coming to know Jesus Christ and the Triune God through Him, is marrying my wife Ruth on July the 25th, 1969. And we've had 46 years of marriage. We have 2 children, my son Trace, who is 40, our daughter Chandra, who's 36. Each one of them have 2 children. All are walking solidly in the faith. And I am so grateful to God for His mercy and grace to Ruth and me and to our seed down through the generations. Well, when I entered Mid-South Bible College after Ruth and I were married in August of 1969, as I said, I decided it's time for me to study. So I studied hard. Graduated from Mid-South Bible College in 1972. I made straight A's all 3 years. I got the academic award for the highest grade point average. And so God had really changed my heart and turned me around where I just couldn't get enough of studying the Word. Well, let me mention a few people who really impacted me a lot at Mid-South Bible College. One person in particular will not be a surprise to anyone. When I graduated from high school in 1963, I had 3 years of electrical engineering, 2 years in the Army, 3 years in Bible college, And I went straight to there, to Dallas Theological Seminary. The first student, by the way, who entered Dallas with an accredited degree from MSBC, and I studied there 4 years. That was 10 years. I did a year in philosophy at Memphis State after seminary, and then I did a doctoral dissertation some years after that. So I've had all these years of study after high school, and I asked myself the question, who is absolutely the best professor I ever had, including Mid-South, including Dallas, including Memphis State? What was the best professor? Who was he? It'll come no surprise to any of you that it was Paul Moody Davidson. The name Moody he got from his grand uncle, the famed D.L. Moody. I was a pallbearer at his funeral. He and I became closer as the years went by, and as I ministered in Memphis before he entered the presence of the Lord, and then I went to Texas for 18 years. Well, he was the greatest one, and it's hard to put your finger on what made him great. But I can think of several things. One is he knew his subject. There was nothing he ever taught, including first year Greek, that he didn't know real well. Secondly, there was never a course that he didn't preach with pathos and compassion. And that included first year Greek and grammar. How many times have we seen him in theology classes, and he is really driving a point home, and with that falsetto voice, he is shaking those big hands like baseball gloves, and he turns toward the students that are just spellbound listening to him, and he says, and this, brothers and sisters, is the incarnation in John 1. And, excuse me, I'm having a problem today. He'd look around the room and it'd be quiet for a minute, and he'd say, and don't you forget it. Remember that little that he often had when he was teaching and preaching. I observed that when students graduated and they came back on campus to see somebody, the first office they went to, and often the last one, was Paul Davidson's office, because he was full of love, he was full of compassion, he was full of the knowledge of God. And when I was pallbearer at his funeral, as C.S. Lewis once stated, when one of his Christian brothers said goodbye, I stated over Paul Davidson's casket, like C.S. Lewis taught us, Christians don't say goodbye to Christians. They say, see you later. And that's what I fully anticipate one day, is to see him around the throne. What a great man, what an emphasis and impact he's had in my own life, and I'm sure in yours. Well, there were other, of course, good professors there. Certainly Dr. Clapp kept our noses to the grind in studying books and giving us so many quizzes. He made us inhale and dissolve and ruminate on and understand whatever book we were studying at the moment, whether it was psychology or the Christian life. He was certainly a man of God, and one that impacted my life. And I've had a lunch with him almost annually the last few years, but I missed last year, and I'm not sure what his status is right now. But he and I would go to lunch together and talk about theology and just enjoy one another's fellowship. Well, there's another professor that wasn't there very long that impacted me as much as anybody has in a certain way. I really didn't know how to write. Greek grammar taught me English grammar, so I began to learn English grammar through Greek grammar. And I had first year beginning Greek under Paul Davidson, second year syntax Greek with Dana and Manny as the textbook under Jim Townsend. He was a good teacher, and I learned it well enough to pass the entrance exam on Greek at Dallas Seminary, so I didn't have to take a year of baby Greek. But there was a lady whose name, when she first came there to teach, was Lucy Forsythe, who married Jim Townsend and became Lucy Townsend. We had a writing course under her. And I remember on one occasion, we came into class and she put an object on her desk and said, I want you to write, several paragraphs on it. Well, she had taught us about headings to paragraphs, continual theme throughout, how to punctuate. And I learned how to write underneath her. So I've written 6 books over the years, full length, and probably 50 to 75 booklets of anywhere from 15, 20 pages up to 100. And I couldn't tell you how many class notes. And the general comment I get on my writing from students and others is, it's clear and understandable. Thank you, Lucy Townsend, for that. Because it surely came from her more than it did from me. Well, there were certainly other things at the Mid-South Bible College that I recall with gratitude, and that was the chapels that we had a lot. That was the annual chapel each year, where Dr. Crichton preached on moral earnestness, which was his first chapel each year. And that was a very good message that he had about being sincere and in our studies and doing our studies as unto the Lord. There were also other professors who were impacted me. They all did to some extent. Mr. Dennison and his sweet, kind spirit that he had all the time, and his excellent knowledge of music was very helpful. I'm just still a club foot when it comes to music, but any little bit that I did learn came from him. Now, I mentioned earlier that Mr. Davidson's full name was Paul Moody Davidson. I've written a little book titled, Why Is God Always Late? You can find it on Amazon. And the book goes through the major trials I've had in my life, one each decade. The first one was when my mother was pregnant with my half-brother, having married a Baptist preacher who decided that when a woman in the church lost her husband in a car wreck and it was double indemnity, and she got an awful lot of money in those days, that if he could kill my mother, make it look like an accident, he could marry this other woman, keep the money, and keep the church. Well, it didn't work. That was my first trial. I've had one every 10 years. The person who meant the most to my mother during that severe affliction she went through was Paul Moody Davidson. So when my half-brother was born, she named him Paul David. So every time I think of Paul David, my half-brother, I think of Mr. Davidson and Mid-South Bible College. Now some may think Mid-South Bible College, since it is gone, I guess it became Crichton College, and then what was the other name? I forgot. Out on Highland. Victory College. That the ministry of Mid-South Bible College was in vain. No, it wasn't. Those who labor in the Lord, their labors continue and they follow. And anyone who had exposure to Mid-South Bible College and is today influencing others, certainly carry on the mission and the methods of Mid-South Bible College. Let me mention several other things. I still use some of the insights from preaching from Mr. Bomar's class in the homiletics. I recall how he could preach a whole sermon without saying which still fascinates me. Dr. Crichton's theology notes I have used over the years from time to time, and they've always been helpful. And the accuracy with which he presented his outline has always been very good and has influenced me to try to do the same. Well, who can forget Mr. Gingrich's lovely smile like the sun that he always seemed to have? And he would teach us with the outlines that he had that were in depth. And he would go through them, and he would be grinning from ear to ear, it seemed like, almost all the way through. And I always really appreciated him. And there were students I got to know at Mid-South Bible College that followed me on to Dallas Theological Seminary. One of those was Pete Fry. And I always cherish the friendship that we had over the years, though since we live in different parts of the country now, we've lost a good bit of our camaraderie that we had. Another one was Randall Johnson, who also followed me to seminary. And we got to be friends at that time, and sometimes he and I go out to eat with Dr. Clapp. Now, I must engage in a little bit of, let's say, putting accolades on people that I think that really deserve them. When I have thought about this over the years, and I've never changed my opinion on it, and I've been saying the same thing for at least 20 years, if not longer. In my humble opinion, the best two graduates we had at Mid-South Bible College were Pat and Carolyn Davey. They've had a tremendous ministry over the years. Honduras, then in New Orleans. And if you've seen their family, how large it is, God has blessed them with His seed, and it is wonderful to see. And they have impacted me from a distance. Well, let's consider a couple of other things. Just to catch up a little bit on my own life, as I mentioned, I graduated from Mid-South Bible College in '72 from Dallas Seminary, which was then an exclusively 4-year degree, THM master's degree, in 1976. And by the way, Pat and Ann Carolyn stayed in our house the summer of 1976 while he was taking some courses at Dallas Seminary. And Ruth and I went to Wilmington, Delaware, where up there I translated Hebrew for a man along with several other men who had majored in Hebrew in seminary. My major was both Greek and Hebrew. So we stayed up there the whole summer, and I translated Hebrew 7 to 8 hours a day, 5-6 days a week. And it was a very profitable time for me to solidify a lot of the stuff that I had studied. Well, when I came back to Dallas from Wilmington, Delaware, I didn't have a job. One of the students asked me just before I graduated, said, "Well, Curtis, now that you're graduating from Dallas Theological Seminary, what are you going to do?" I said, "I don't know, but I can tell you 3 things I'm not going to do. I'm not moving back to Memphis. I'm not going to be a pastor of a church. And I'm not going to teach at the Bible college from which I graduated." You don't say those kind of things to God. Well, guess what? In about 5 months, I was doing all 3. I had moved back to Memphis. I had taken a church, and I was teaching part-time at Mid-South Bible College. The first church I had was a Bible church. I read my way into Presbyterianism, and I became a PCA pastor for 12 years. And then I read my way into Anglicanism, and I joined the Reformed Episcopal Church in May of 1991. And I'm still with them after all these years. I think I found my place. And I have been teaching in one of the Reformed Episcopal seminaries since its inception in 1994. And so for 20 years I've been teaching Greek and Hebrew, but I'm happy to announce that now we got somebody else to do that. And I've taught some various theology courses like Doctrine of God and Christ. I have taught Man, Sin, and Salvation, 39 articles, which is our doctrinal statement. I have taught marriage and family and other things, and I've really enjoyed teaching in seminary. But also I helped to found a Presbyterian church in Memphis. It eventually became a Reformed Episcopal church. It is still going. And then I moved out of Memphis and went to Texas. And I was the founding pastor of St. Francis in Spring, Texas, which is a suburb of Houston. And one of my former students now has the church, and it is going real well. So I've helped to start a seminary and start 2 churches. As I said earlier, I've written 6 books, and I've got more items to write than I have life left to do them. One of the books was on the point of theology, might be of interest to some. It was called Dispensationalism Today, Yesterday, and Tomorrow. One of the men I got to know in seminary was Charles Ryrie, and he and I were friends. And eventually I dropped the notion of dispensationalism and had moved into a more covenantal liturgical view of Scripture. But that was after I had graduated. I also wrote a book titled How to Profit from Our Afflictions. That has been a very popular work. Another one is titled Lordship Salvation, the Only Kind There Is. And then another one, Man as God, the Word of Faith Movement. That was my doctoral dissertation. Man is God, the Word of Faith Movement. They tend to view themselves as divine. And my 5th book was Not 10 Suggestions. In other words, 10 Commandments, not 10 suggestions. And the final work I mentioned earlier, Why is God Always Late? Well, of course He isn't. And the miracles that have been in my life have been one of timing, over and over again. I encourage you to get that little book if you'd like and read it. I think it would be an encouragement to you. So what else can I say? Well, I can just say this, I guess, as to where I am now. I moved back to the Memphis area about a year and a half ago. We live outside Summerville, Tennessee. If any of you live in Memphis or come this way, please drop me an email and let us see if we can't get together. My email is my initials, C.I., last name, Crenshaw, CRENSHAW, @gmail.com. Or you can just get on Google and type in Curtis Crenshaw and you'll find me all over the place. I have a blog out there that still has quite a number of my sermons, and it is under sermonaudio.com. I have my own personal blog, curtiscrenshaw.wordpress.com. I'm on Facebook, Twitter. I have my own website for our books, which is www.faithfulfellowship.com. footstool, abbreviated as FTSTL.com. I'm on YouTube and have my own channel there. I'm still listed under our seminary, Cranmer, CRANMER, house.org. You still find me under my old church, St. Francis. I'm not sure what the actual URL is, but be St. Francis and Reformed Episcopal Church, or St. Francis Anglican Church. I have books on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I'm on LinkedIn, Google+, Google Books, Google Hangouts. I use Google AdWords, and so forth. So maybe this will bring you up a little bit to where we are. I turned 70 years old this past February, and sometimes I feel it. And probably you can identify with that. But this is a synopsis of what Mid-South Bible College has meant to me. And my wife could echo many of the same sentiments that I have. And I didn't say a whole lot about Dallas Seminary since we did not, or not together at that time. But there were certainly men besides Ryrie who impacted me. One was Dr. Ed Bloom, B-L-U-M, was a tremendous influence on me. And another was the church history department head, John Hanna. I love his works. Still corresponded with him on occasion. He is a wonderful man of God. And even though we don't agree on some things, we know that we both believe the gospel. And that's the important point. The essence of Christianity to me is given in the creeds of the church. And there are basically three of them. The Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, the Athanasian Creed. Apostles' Creed came first, and then there were problems that needed to be ironed out. So the Apostles' Creed was fleshed out into the Nicene Creed in 325 AD. And then in the following Council of Constantinople, 381, the Nicene Creed was fine-tuned, never to be changed again. That is the most universal creed that everybody holds to. Eastern Orthodoxy, Roman Catholicism, Anglicanism, of which I'm a part, Presbyterianism, Lutheranism, and most evangelicals hold to the essence of that creed, even though they may not say it in their worship services. But they're Trinitarian. They believe in creation. They believe that in God the Son equal with the Father. They hold to His incarnation, His death on the cross as a substitute for our sins, His bodily resurrection, His ascension, and His coming, and one baptism for the forgiveness of sins. They might not want to put it exactly that way, but a lot of that's in the definition of it. And so evangelicals will hold to the vast majority of the Nicene Creed. And that to me is what is important. Some of the other fine-tuning we do on eschatology, pre-meal, all-meal, post-meal, windmill, pan-meal, whatever view you hold, you got to hold to something. You got to hold the second coming. Or however you fine-tune it is not going to get you to heaven quicker or keep you from going there. But the second coming is very important. So this is our little catch-up, and I hope you'll find it helpful. Again, don't forget my email, cicrenshaw@gmail.com. I check it all throughout the day. God bless us all. Amen.